He's been working in the game industry since 2018 now. Started off as an analyst in Rockstar, been a game designer, and finally game director for his very own game now. You, as founder of Monotus Studios, is offering equity in Monotus in its entirety, or it's only for this project? How do
For
you
the
go about that?
entirety.
You're one of the very few indie games from India to actually go to Tokyo. How difficult or easy was it for you to find people to work with you?
I think you are aware of Nikhil Kamat's W2F.
Somehow I personally feel, and I think many people will agree, that some kind of non-serious gaming experience exists on mobile. What would you say to any budding entrepreneur who's thinking about starting a game dev studio or working in the game industry? What do you tell him?
Don't start with like audacious projects which would take like 3 or 4 years to complete. Start small. That's what I would say.
For sure. Baby steps.
Although we are relatively behind compared to other countries in terms of like
Of
supporting
course,
video
yeah.
games.
Yeah.
But at least the start is there. The culture is picking up, and then there is some sort of a helping hand from the government.
Any budding entrepreneur who's thinking about starting a game dev studio or working in the game industry, what do you tell him? I have Mr. Karthik Raj. So he's been working in the game industry since 2018 now. Started off as an analyst in Rockstar, been a game designer, and finally game director for his very own game now. He's developing a game called Palm Sugar through Monotus Studios. What's interesting and why I really want to talk to you was everyone who's ever been a gamer always thinks this question, right? कि इंडिया में क्यों अच्छा गेम नहीं बनता है? Because all the stories you're seeing वो सब बाहर ही बनता है. It will be a very interesting talk with you because you've taken the bold step of actually starting off your own business. So what really made you bite the bullet, so to say, and like, okay, मैं अपना studio start करूंगा.
I had few ideas that I could not experiment with. When they're making game, वो उन्हीं की मनमानी चलती है. If they have a vision that they want to follow, they will follow it and they will not take up my ideas. ऐसे मुझे लगा कि बहुत बार जब मैं काम कर रहा था उनके साथ तो यार ये मैं अगर खुद का ऐसा कुछ बना लेता हूँ तो चल जाएगा. This became serious once I was selected for STPI, which is Software Technology Parks of India, had its own cohort. I wasn't even a registered entity back then. And once I got selected into this, and probably like, this is my path that, the life has organically chosen. So probably let's venture into this.
What was your parents' reaction and colleagues and extended colleagues doing a job? Probably you were paying decently well, especially compared to starting up on your own, right? Now there's no guarantee or safety net of a salary kind of thing happening now, right? How did they react?
Of course, you understand Indian parents,
Yeah.
they don't have any understanding of what video games are, like how you make money from video games. And especially if you're coming from a tier 2 city where the surrounding itself is like get a government job or like,
Correct.
people understand these cliche words of Wipro, TCS, which like
Correct.
everybody, these are famous. So yeah, of course, there was a lot of backlash. Like my mom still says that it's a little bit shameful for her to tell to her peer group as in like what my son is doing. She doesn't really understand. Nobody understands what I'm doing. So yeah, it's a little bit challenging. And then at one point of time when I'm still not generating any revenue. So they say like, why don't you just get a real job and instead of doing all this?
But that's the tough part of doing what you believe in, right? I mean, because at one point you'll be the only person who's believing in it. That's the toughest part of starting anything.
At this point, I feel that even my team is also with me. Like they also believe in the vision.
100%, man. You're one of the very few indie games from India to actually go to Tokyo in Tokyo Game Show, right? I don't think a lot of indie game devs have a tick mark like that, right? That's a big deal. How was your experience in Tokyo?
But from a Tokyo game show perspective, I think I got to learn a lot. Like there was this Polish guy who had a booth set up beside me, and then I got a lot of insight from him. And also when you look at like other countries and their pavilion compared to our pavilion, because India, first time we set up a pavilion, there was still a lot of catching up to do in terms of infrastructure in general. But I think since this was our first attempt, it was a learning for every one of us.
I was like super happy, like, अरे अपना ही country से कोई जा रहा है. And especially you are from Andhra, Telangana, right?
Andhra.
Which side of the border are you?
I'm from Andhra.
So we're the same actually.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Especially Telugu speaking person who's made a very rooted kind of a game, which is talking about that story of a village. I mean, that's crazy to my mind, man. It is brilliant.
Majority of the heavy lifting has been done by IGDC, India Game Developer Conference. They had actually bought the pavilion and subsidized it for the studios who got selected. So,
okay.
So
you still had to pay for something for this?
We did have to pay a little bit. I mean, it wasn't like a mammoth amount.
But that's a good thing, right? At least you get that feeling that ecosystem is supporting
although we are relatively behind compared to other countries in terms of like
Of
supporting
course,
video
yeah,
games,
yeah.
but at least the start is there. The culture is picking up, and then there is some sort of a helping hand from the government.
Did you ever think about doing something like a Indiegogo kind of a thing to raise funds? Because I imagine starting up, it must be difficult getting artists, getting your infra in place, hiring people. So did you ever think about raising money that way?
That was one of the options. I think if you're aware of Indiegogo and Kickstarter is
Yeah,
technically not
Kickstarter, yeah.
available in India because you either have to have a US bank account or there are like select few countries where you can actually start the Kickstarter program. So Kickstarter was never an option in case we get funded by a publisher, which fingers crossed might be on the horizon for us. Yeah, fingers crossed, of course.
Did you consciously choose to go build it on PC rather than do it on mobile? The logical thing would be, to my mind, I might be completely wrong, is there a lot more users on mobile?
No, you're absolutely right about it. So the reason why I did not go that is like I personally I'm not a
Mobile gamer.
mobile gamer per se. I do understand that if you're purely looking at from a monetary and reach perspective, and I think mobile is a good thing. But like somehow my product wasn't fitting in there. Like you have many options, so you would if it's a touchscreen game, it's just gonna flood the entire screen with like
Understood.
different.
All the controls are all over the
yeah.
place. And especially
Yeah,
your
which-
game has that art style of pixel art. I've been
thank
through your
you.
YouTube channel also. Some of the stuff you're doing is brilliant. What do you think about the fact that somehow I personally feel, and I think many people will agree, that some kind of non-serious gaming experience exists on mobile? But when I think back about mobile games, I don't think many games have that lasting impression in my head. Most of them are like trying to push a ad at your face, right? That's how it is.
Yeah, I mean,
But like you buy
again,
these coins to like do this level or some nonsense like that.
on a small screen, the level of immersion that you have is less compared to a bigger screen. I wouldn't say directly proportional to the size of the screen, your immersion, because that's subjective. If you're sitting down in front of a computer holding, your fingers are not on the screen, but you're holding a
Right.
controller, and then you get to experience the entire thing. And you're right about the immersion fact. I mean, or especially I can resonate with that thought process.
So when is Palm Sugar getting completed? I know this is a question for the future, but when is it happening?
In August of 2025. So the longer we take time to develop, we are also burning resources and money.
Right.
And in a way getting bored with the product because you get to see the same kind of assets
Correct.
every day. We also want to work on something new. We are constantly making new asset which actually give us the sense of novelty
And
every time.
also, when you're doing the same thing continuously for a while, you kind of lose some objectivity about it, right? I mean,
Exactly. You get desensitized.
yeah, अच्छा या
to it.
खराब है, and now you need somebody from outside to come and tell you कि
100%.
this is
that
bad or
happens.
this is working, this is not
That
working.
happens. Yeah, that's happening. That's I think common with everyone.
So when you do this kind of a game, right? Because it's pixel art, probably doesn't need a very heavy system, I'm assuming. How important is story for you, right? When you're doing this?
We have the story is one element of it because a lot of people they just button mash through a lot of
Correct.
text and then get to the gameplay part. There are three pillars of the game. One is the narrative, the second is the puzzle element, and creative combat, third element, which is in a way tied with the puzzle element.
How difficult or easy was it for you to find people to work with you?
I was a little bit lucky in this regard. So I think the first person, Kaushik, who's my programmer, we met on Instagram. Initially, I was doing both the code as well as the pixel art, but to be honest, it's a little bit difficult for one
Correct.
person to handle two things. Kaushik was handling the entire code, and I was just making
Assets.
pixel art and animation. Then my cousin happens to be a music producer. He jumped on board. He started making music for our game. Similarly, we found a guy called Shrikant Allapu, who's from the Telugu film industry. So we borrowed him. One of my ex-colleagues from Rockstar said I'm interested in the project.
Nice.
So I got him in as well. One more guy who's helping us with UI. He's doing a really fantastic job. He joined as an intern. And then, that's the current team right now.
How do you go about marketing an indie game like this?
I am more of someone who makes games rather than marketing, and marketing is something that I'm figuring out as I go. What I figured out is if you don't have a budget for marketing, I'm relying on free resources like YouTube and Instagram, and then just do your job and hope and pray that whatever hashtags that you used or the algorithm might have picked up well, or the content itself is a little bit interesting that it gets shared around.
But trailer was an IGN in India, right? I mean, that was crazy.
Yeah, IGN in India. So IGN again, most of these YouTube channels, they actually charge money. Tokyo Game Show also runs the Steam's event page. Whenever there's a Tokyo Game Show, Steam has a sale going on.
So does Steam also give you stats? So this many people have wishlisted your game and so on?
Yeah, it does give us.
Is your wishlist count making
right
you happy?
Now, so after the demo released, it had doubled up overnight, which again
Nice.
is not a huge number. It was 200. some 200 odd number, and after the demo and few streams, it was 400 odd number, and right now it's sitting at 600. I haven't checked recently.
You as founder of Monotusk Studios is offering equity in Monotusk in its entirety, or it's only for this project? How do
For
you
the
go about
entirety.
for
For
the
the
entirety
entirety.
only?
Yeah.
तेरा future game में भी
हाँ
वो रहने वाला है. You already work in various capacities in indie game studios and in slightly bigger companies and so on. Wouldn't that change the mindset of somebody putting in money and they'd be like, okay, at least इसको पता तो है कैसे होता है, process क्या है?
I think you are aware of Nikhil Kamat's W2F
Yeah,
funding.
right.
So I did apply for that. I think first two levels I was through, and the second, the interview where I was very honest about the kind of revenue this game would make, because that was at that point it made sense for me to answer that. Like, let's say they asked like what kind of money the game would make, I said like probably around 20,000 USD, which is like 16 lakhs. I'm being really realistic, because at that moment, whatever kind of help and whatever state the game was, reasonable for me to say that. You do have to showcase a little bit of hope, as in what kind of money. Optimism, exactly. But me being a realistic, I feel that sometimes I shoot myself in the foot with these kind of offers.
What are your favorite games?
I think hands down Witcher 3 and
Oh, yes.
Assassin's Creed Origins had also moved me a lot. And I'm a huge fan of the Prince of Persia series since I was a child. I think people knew that I was a Prince of Persia fanatic back in the day.
So we'll just close up last few questions. So, what's your most favorite recent indie game that you've played?
Firewatch, Blasphemous. There's a game called Inmost, published by Chucklefish. Another game called Eastward, which I'm inspired from, and I'm trying to replicate their success.
So, PC or console, like, what would you play?
I would say both, like actually PC and
Correct,
console.
no?
Right? Even I use a controller on my PC.
I think people get unnecessarily emotional about being fanboys for both. Like, man, play both, right? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Parting remarks, dude. What would you say to any budding entrepreneur who's thinking about starting a game dev studio or working in the game industry? What do you tell him?
Don't start with like audacious projects which would take like 3 or 4 years to complete. Do something that you can finish in like 3 months or 4 months. Small stuff, and start small. That's what I would say.
For sure. Baby steps. So cool, man, Karthik. Amazing talking to you. I have this wish listed. I wish you best of luck, man. I hope you do really well.
Likewise.
I hope you do an amazing game after this game also.